Hello, YouTube and Dr. Rome. Welcome back to my channel. And this week I will be talking about my favorite quotes from chapters 20 and 21 in Larry Spear's Focus on Leadership. There you can see better. This week we have two authors. The first one, Joseph Jarowski. Here's a picture of him. He is the founder of the American Leadership Forum. He helps strategize and generate leadership development in the corporate setting. So he actually was doing law, and he left that to fix the leadership crisis going on throughout the country. And so he has a lot of experience, as he talks about in his section of the book, where he's saying that he met with hundreds, or not hundreds, but at least 20 of the top leaders, which in turn most likely led him to meet with hundreds of people and develop them as leaders. So yeah, we'll begin chapter 20 of Focus on Leadership, which is titled Synchronicity and Servant Leadership. This was an interesting chapter of stuff that kind of sounded like spiritual, but he wasn't really ever referring to God. So he says on page 288, the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung referred to this phenomenon as synchronicity, those perfect moments when things come together in an almost unbelievable way, and events that you could hardly predict seem to guide you along your way. I feel like I've encountered some moments like this where it seems like what he's talking about is when you're working and something just happens where it takes your mind, essentially takes over, and you go into another level of ability, I would say, where it's like you're working, but it doesn't feel like you're working. Things are just getting done naturally. It's an easy, smooth process. And like he's saying, those perfect moments when things come together almost unbelievably. And he talks about after that tornado, how everyone came together and just worked smoothly well together. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if I've encountered it too much in a group setting, but hopefully in the future I will. But to more describe it, that quote also was 288. On page 291, he talks about Bell's theorem, and he says, when two subatomic particles are paired and spinning in a bubble chamber, if you separate them and then change the spin on one particle, the spin on the other simultaneously changes, no matter the distance between the two. It's on page 291. And so I think that kind of gives a glimpse into what he's talking about, of it doesn't necessarily matter about who the people are, where they are. It's almost like a above mental, it's almost a spiritual connection is what it seems like he's talking about, where people have this connection and insight to each other without even being around each other and without communicating. But he doesn't put the word God or Jesus into it. So yeah, and then it was another interesting part at the very end on page 293. He talks about convening and observing. And so he says it's that you bring forth the new in the form that it desires. The dynamic is similar to what happens in old stories of Chinese master artists who would go and sit by a landscape for weeks at a time doing nothing, and then in an instant they would begin to paint their masterpiece and be finished in 15 minutes. It seems like in the servant leadership principles, it's talking about similar to reflecting and just taking time to almost what these artists are doing, are studying what they would do in the future. But maybe what we should be doing is reflecting peacefully upon our leadership. So that could probably be what he's talking about. Next, Dr. Ruby Bray. She is a retired lieutenant colonel in the military, and I believe that's a picture. And so she has a lot of military experience. She's worked as a news reporter and an organizational development consultant, and so she's done many speeches and talks on leadership just from her experience in the military. But yeah, let's dive into chapter 21, which is servant leadership leading in today's military. On page 295, the great quote starting out the book, she says, "Those who know do not say. Those who say do not know." And I just love that mindset of like the wise hold their tongue. It sounds almost like a biblical proverb, but the fool runs his mouth. And it's like, as leaders, do we always need to be the ones coming up with the ideas or talking or saying this and that? Why don't we involve the others and get them in part of the decision-making processes, things like that, but also of just not acting like we know it all. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, and we don't have to constantly be talking. And yeah, I've just always thought that was interesting. When I was a kid, my friend's dad, he was like, "You know why people think you're dumb?" And he was talking to his son. He's like, "Because you talk too much. You should be like Micah. He doesn't say anything. I think he's a genius." It's kind of funny, like kind of rude, but it was like in context, it was funny. But I was like, okay, maybe be kind of quiet sometimes. Don't say everything on my mind, and you appear to know, you know. So yeah. The next quote I got 297, talking about the leadership and the old way of leadership in the military. It says, They were men who believed in me and I in them. They encouraged me without being condescending. I think that's a key thing as leaders that we should keep in mind of like, how do we teach but not make the student feel like less than or stupid. It's about knowing the people and knowing where they're at. I think that's an important key. And just being conscious of that condescending tone. Nobody likes that. And then my final quote on page 300, she says, "Who you are now is a result of where you were when." Okay, wait 1 second. I just forgot how that went. Okay, yeah. Who you are now is a result of where you were when. There is no changing the past, but we are not frozen in time. So kind of just talking about like that sentence obviously doesn't quite grammatically make sense. But what it's saying is more of like, we're not stuck in the past. And a lot of leaders in the military, they really focus on, what did this person do before me? And we're just going to repeat that according to what she's saying. And she's saying who you are now is not necessarily always just like, we have to do what was happening before. We're not frozen in time. There isn't any changing the past, but we can look to the future and the current time and make ourselves better. So overall, I thought these chapters were pretty cool. Very interesting read. But yeah, that concludes my video, and thanks for watching. See you next week.